Hello, everyone. In this chapter, let's first talk about the G of language. We know that learning a language is essentially the progress of establishing the G associated with that language. For instance, we're learning English as we memorize the word egg. An English G of egg forms in our brain, connecting with the Chinese G for 鸡蛋. For Chinese speakers, the G for 鸡蛋 already has an established link to the physical object of an egg, ultimately creating an indirect G connection between the English word egg and the actual egg. This G connection in Chinese speakers arises from living in a Chinese speaking environment where repeated simultaneously activation of the Chinese G for egg for 鸡蛋 and the physical G for eggs have strengthened this link over time. Broadly speaking, we can say that learning any language is a process of establishing and reinforcing connections between the linguistic G's of words and the numerous corresponding objects or concepts. In the early stages of learning a new language, because forming these G connections is challenging, new language Gs for objects often connect indirectly to the objects themselves via the learner's native language. For instance, when we learn the word egg, we might first think of the word in our native Chinese as 鸡蛋 and then associate it with the physical egg. However, if someone has recently learned the word egg, but they then spends decades in an English speaking environment, if you were to show them a physical egg and ask what it is, they would instinctively say egg, possibly even forgetting the Chinese term 鸡蛋. Despite once associating the physical egg with 鸡蛋 to remember egg. This happens because when living in China, our everyday experiences with eggs tightly link the physical object of the egg with the Chinese 鸡蛋. When we first memorize the English word egg, we create a G connection between egg and the Chinese word for it, 鸡蛋. But after living in an English speaking environment for a long time, the physical egg becomes directly and strongly associated with the G for egg through daily experience, and the Chinese G for 鸡蛋 no longer serves as a bridge. This process is akin to transitioning from third-party meditation to a direct connection, mediation to a direct connection, whereby a new experimental G waves reshape old Gs, demonstrating the plasticity of Gs. Some might notice that this is similar to desensitization in the treatment of phobias. We can think of egg as the object of fear, the Chinese 举鸡蛋 as the old dangerous exper, parental Jew, and the English environment as the desensitization setting, with the English Jew act as the new safe uh, experimental Jew. Once a new reaction pattern forms, the old pattern gradually fades. Here, the new reaction pattern, essentially the new experimental G is formed through new safer experiences. In essence, it is the process by which sensory G wave reshape old Gs. For individuals with phobias, if desensitization therapy is not undertaken, the symptoms of the phobias may persist as the original experimental G has not been effectively reshaped. Im- Imagery therapy can also have some effect, as it requires patients to courageously and immersively recall the source of their fear. This is essentially using simulated G waves to reshape experimental Gs, similar to the reshaping process of sensory G waves. Why must one recall fear immersively? Because without immersion, it is difficult to simulate a real experience. And why must one recall fear courageously? Because without courage, it is difficult to establish a new safe simulated experimental G. Through the examples above, we revisited the treatment of phobias and gained insight into the G of language. At the same time, we can deduce that our linguistic G are broadly connected to the G's of various objects stored in our brains, and these connections have been continuously learned and established throughout our growth. Additionally, we can see that Jews can be reshaped and updated, a process that involves the atrophy of old connections. Now, let us move to understand the atrophy of Jews. Let's return to the topic of seeing pleasure and avoiding pain. If an individual engages in a behavior that leads to a positive outcome, they are more likely to repeat that behavior. For example, if a boy reaches out his hand to you and you give him a candy, he might want to reach out for candy again next time. Conversely, if a behavior results in a negative outcome, the, the individual is more likely to avoid that behavior in the future. For example, if a man whistles at a dog on the street and the dog bites him, he may not be inclined to whistle at dogs in the future. In these examples, the individual has altered their behavior pattern due to the formation of a G, and the new behavior pattern is influenced by expectation. Expectation is the G wave of the newly formed simulated G. When an expectation arises, or when a new G operates, the G wave induces an approach or avoidance response. But what happens when the environmental feedback does not meet these expectations? Let's return to the two previous examples. Suppose that when the boy reaches out his hand to you again, expecting candy, you slap him instead. Oh, how cruel. Or if the man encounters a dog again, refrains from whistling, yet still gets beaten. What a tragedy. In both cases, the individual's expectations are unmet, meaning the G wave from sensory input did not match the simulated G wave of expectation. This mismatch neither reinforces the G nor strengthens it, but instead causes damage, leading to the atrophy of the G. In other words, this damage can be viewed as a kind of a renewal. As a new G forms, the boy may learn that reaching out does not always yield candy, and the man may realize that whistling is not necessarily the cause of a dog's aggression. However, if the boy receives candy when reaching out again, or if the man avoids being beaten by not whistling, then their original G would be reinforced. We could see that our life journey, influenced by our environment, is a continuous process of forming, reinforcing, and sometimes weakening various Gs in our bodies. These Gs, through their activation, influence our behavior. Thus, the environment acts upon our bodies, shaping our personality. Additionally, the evolution of simulated G waves has a significant impact on changing Gs, and this is also an indispensable force in the evolution of an individual's mental state. This analysis reveals two lines in personality development. One is the direct response to the environment and the body, and the other is indirect response. Oh, today's content is so abundant. So that's all. See you next time. Bye bye.